with a panel discussion on the normalization of COVID immunization delivery in BC. Thank you. Over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Bethany. As Bethany mentioned, my name is Emily Malnis, and I am the Regional Immunization Leader for Vancouver Coastal Health. This afternoon, we would like to start by shifting our mindset forward as we think through moving COVID vaccines from the largest mass provincial campaign to potentially integrating them into our routine immunization programs. Before we do that, though, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the exercise that we collectively participated in and what we have accomplished in the last year. Worldwide, we have engaged in the largest vaccine campaign in history, with over 10.8 billion doses of vaccine administered. And here in BC, we administered 11.3 million of those doses. I want to thank each and every one of the immunizers and support staff, operations coordinators, wayfinders, knowledge sharers, and community members who have contributed to this unbelievable achievement. The tireless and creative efforts of all involved have resulted in lives saved and communities forging their way back to life with meaningful social connections and joyful interactions. I would like to echo the words shared by others yesterday and say thank you. Today, we have an amazing panel of people who have been and will continue to be involved in our provincial COVID-19 vaccine campaign. I will first invite each panelist to share with us what their role in the campaign has been and their vision for integrating COVID-19 vaccine into their routine practice or to that of their teams. As the panel is speaking, please use the Q&A question section on Slido to ask questions of the panel members. If your question is directed to a specific person, please do be sure to indicate their name so that we can direct it the right way. I'm happy to introduce today our four panelists, Dr. Brenda Tan, a family doctor working in Richmond, BC, Mr. Jonathan Spence, the manager of the CD Prevention and Control Program for Interior Health, Mr. Bryce Wong, the Director of Pharmacy Practice Support and Special Projects with the BC Pharmacy Association, and Dr. Bennie Balam, the Executive Lead and the Architect of the massive COVID-19 vaccine campaign in BC. Additional details about each presenter are noted in the forum program. Dr. Tan, let's start with you. How have you been involved in the COVID-19 vaccination clinics, and what role would you like for yourself or other family physicians in this campaign in the coming months?
Hi there, thank you so much for the introduction. So I'm Brenda Tan. I'm a family physician working in Richmond, and I've been here for 20 years. I provide traditional family care and family practice, and I have a special interest in maternity care. So when I think about vaccinations, it's certainly a routine part of my daily work. It's part of the core competencies. So when there was a call for vaccinators for the COVID vaccination campaign, I just really wanted to participate and to help. I just want to say that I have no conflicts. Okay. So my journey with the vaccination campaign started after completing the requisite courses. I was fortunate enough to work at several vaccination clinics in Vancouver Coastal Health, including Vancouver Convention Center, KPU, River Rock, and most recently the Pacific Autism Network. In the summer, it was really fun to also work at even some pop-up clinics. In particular, the pop-up clinic at the Richmond Night Market was very memorable for the excellent street food. It was very tasty. It was also really exciting at these clinics to be, on the front line. The energy was great. The teams were collaborative. The situations were dynamic. There was continuous quality improvement. So overall, the experience was really, really rewarding. also had the chance to participate in the Homebound program, delivering vaccines to clients who were unable to leave their home. And during these visits, patients and families expressed so much gratitude. It was truly heartwarming. But even though it's been extremely satisfying to get vaccines into thousands of arms, by the time patients made it to the vaccine clinics, I certainly felt that most of them were ready and had already made up their minds to get vaccinated. So when I reflected on my own contribution, I actually felt that my greatest impact for the vaccination campaign has actually been to just be me, a family physician in my office. Even though I had no access to vaccines, patient came in every day with their vaccination questions. Patients needed help booking appointments. They had concerns regarding eligibility and efficacy. They had anxieties over potential side effects and adverse events. And certainly with working in Richmond, there were lots of concerns over language barriers and communication at the clinic. For the vaccine hesitant patients, the conversations were even more complex and often required patience and multiple encounters. But most importantly, the conversations happened. So in the end, I think patients see their family physicians, as a trusted healthcare professional, someone where if we make a strong recommendation, maybe we can have an impact on a patient's likelihood of getting vaccinated. So I guess the issue is, if only we had access to COVID vaccines. In the future, I believe that family physicians are well situated to participate in an integrated quality COVID vaccination program in the community. Firstly, family physicians who offer routine vaccinations already have infrastructure and key processes in place. In terms of logistics, managing the cold chain and inventory is standard. Different products with different dosing can be a challenge, but we already managed flu shots in much the same way. In terms of skills, preparing vaccines and getting informed consent is routine. In terms of paperwork, family physicians already report immunizations, adverse events following immunizations, as well as vaccination errors to public health. Okay. But what differentiates family physicians from other healthcare providers is that we know our patients and we have the relationship. So I guess finally, I just want to say, integrating COVID vaccinations will require some special considerations, and it's going to be a learning process and opportunities for quality improvement. But I feel with the core pieces already in place, family physicians can deliver a quality and robust COVID vaccination program in their offices. Thank you.
And thank you for advocating for your patients and then joining us as an immunizer in all of our clinics. Jonathan, will you now share with us from a public health perspective?
Absolutely. Thank you, Emily, and thank you for the organizers of inviting and having me here. I do want to mention that I am joining from here in Burnaby, which is on the unceded traditional ancestral territories of the Six Nation. I also don't have a slide deck, so I will tell you I have no conflicts or disclosures, but I am open to corporate sponsorship. I'll put your logo right on my shoulder as needed. But in terms of my involvement with the COVID immunization delivery, as part of my job, I manage and I lead the immunization program, the regular routine immunization program, as well as flu immunization programs here in Interior Health. And so for the COVID immunization program, I had the opportunity to be involved right from the get-go before there was a vaccine, and involved in a lot of different roles, including logistics, making sure that we were going to have the vaccine or we needed the vaccine, working with our operations groups to make sure that we have immunization clinics in all of our different communities, in our urban centers, in our semi-rural centers, in our very rural centers here in Interior Health, and just we're matching our supply to the demand as we move forward. And obviously working with our other partners, with BCCDC, with our physicians, our physicians here in Interior Health, as well as with our pharmacists with community immunization partners. And so sort of through this,
Yeah.
what I look at is we have,
So what would, hi, Jonathan, sorry, we're getting some comments that it's hard to hear you.
okay,
Are you able to adjust your mic?
we'll see what I can do.
Maybe put some headphones on if you have them handy. We really want to hear what you have to say.
Is that any better or worse? Better, good, okay. I will keep going then. So disregard anything I've said already, it wasn't that important. More or less what we've done in terms of the initial rollout and my involvement. I really like to look at it as at the beginning of this COVID immunization response, we were a province, we were a world full of newborns. We didn't have any protection against COVID. And really what we've done over the last 14 months is we've gotten to the point where we are all a bunch of 2-year-olds or 7-year-olds. We have that initial series on board for the most part. And now it's going forward in terms of how do we integrate it into our regular schedule. Obviously, going forward, every year we're going to have a new age cohort. Right now, 5-year-olds, as they turn 5, they're eligible for this vaccine as a standard recommended vaccine. And so really I see going forward, that is the role of public health, much with the other vaccines that we roll out as part of our infant and toddler programs, as well as our school programs, making those vaccines available to those children, to those youth. And then obviously we have a large cohort, most of the population, who have 1 dose, 2 dose, or a third, a booster dose on board. And so going forward, there is the unknown of how many booster doses. Is it annual? Is it intermittent? Is it biannual? Whatever it may be. Really, I see a lot of analogies going forward with the flu program that we run each year. And by we, I mean the global we, I mean public health, I mean our community vaccine providers, so physicians, as well as our pharmacy partners. I think it fits well into what we've done. We've actually are returning now back to something that is equivalent to our regular immunization programs, where COVID is another antigen, another immunization that we're able to offer, and we're able to offer it to a broad population who overall has some protection. And so really it's how do we now make, I guess, COVID immunization a little less special and integrate it into that overall routine immunization to make sure that we have continued protection. The other piece is how do we respond to the changing nature of COVID. So if we do need to have a large booster program, if we do see variants where we have specific vaccines tailored to those variants, how do we ramp back up with all of our partners? So not just public health, not just health authorities, but with pharmacies, with physicians, with everyone. Just because in general, as we all know, I think the more hands there are, the easier the lift it is for each and every one of us. But I think also going forward, it is looking at the client and where do they feel comfortable getting immunized. So a piece of it is going to be public health. It's going to be especially for those infants, those youth, those children. But then for the larger population, for adults, is it their physician? Is it their community vaccine provider? Is it their pharmacy? Is it public health? And I think that going forward, it's really looking at how do we cover all of those opportunities and integrate it, as I said, and make COVID vaccination maybe a little less special, but more widely available to everyone. And thanks.
It's been a pleasure to work with you over the last year, and I always appreciate that you lighten the mood in the room with your humor. Okay, Bryce, we'll turn it over to you. Will you share with us how the pharmacists of BC have been involved and what you see going forward?
For sure, and thanks, Emily, for inviting me to speak today. So I have some slides and just trying to share it here, but here we go. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bryce Wong. I'm the Director of Pharmacy Practice Support at the BC Pharmacy Association. I see the echo is back. First, I'd like to acknowledge that I am presenting and have the privilege to live and also work on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. I don't have any disclosures or conflicts of interest to disclose. So I just thought I'd take a few minutes to kind of talk about, where we've been as far as pharmacy goes and kind of how things sort of change with COVID and perhaps where we go next. So just a little bit about the association. We're a voluntary member association. We represent about 4,000 pharmacists and pharmacies. We advocate for the profession with government and other stakeholders. And we strongly support the expanded use of pharmacists across the healthcare system. In regards to immunization, we've supported the scope of practice really since its inception in 2009, when pharmacists were asked to step up and support the H1N1 response. And as you can see here, we're involved in a number of ways in supporting the role of pharmacists in delivering public health vaccination campaigns. And I think where things, and I guess in the past, usually our role has been to provide advice or recommendations to the ministry and health authorities and BCCDC as far as how do they engage with pharmacists, how do they recruit pharmacists to support various vaccination campaigns, and we've participated in some of those activities ourselves. But the big change, I think, that came around with COVID is that thanks to Dr. Balam and her immunization rollout team, they gave us the opportunity to really play a more hands-on role as far as managing the recruitment, engagement, and deployment of pharmacies across the province to support the COVID vaccination campaign, as well as coordinating the logistics around moving the vaccines to those pharmacies through the pharmacy distribution network. And so in a way, pharmacies this time around were sort of managed in a parallel track to kind of what was happening in the mass clinics. And we were acting sort of as their kind of coordination center, providing technical and practice support, as well as continuous updates on program changes. And I think that was an effective way to manage pharmacies. And so for our journey through the COVID vaccination campaign, it really went from wanting to be part of the campaign to then being thrust into the AstraZeneca campaign, and then managing a IMSS-BC pilot, testing the application in a select number of pharmacies over the summer, and then managing the logistics around direct distribution of influenza vaccine, which kind of gave us more experience as far as coordinating the logistics of vaccines across the province for pharmacies, and then really moving into full deployment of IMSS-BC in pharmacies across the province for the booster campaign in December. And so in order to support pharmacies, we had to create a lot of new, systems and procedures in order to support all of the work. And so, for instance, some of the things we did was, we had to create kind of this recruitment, enrollment, selection process, as well as creating a schedule for activating pharmacies in alignment with kind of the needs of the various regions. We had to create databases to manage provisioning users to access resources and training, as well as access the IMSS-BC system. We had to create a training pathway for pharmacists to get themselves up to speed with the IMSS-BC system, as well as just all of the continuous changes with the program itself and the clinical guidance there. And I think one of the more complicated things we had to do was create a vaccine ordering process, working very closely with Dr. Balam's team, as well as BCCDC and the health authorities, as far as how do we move the vaccine from those pharmacy distributors to pharmacies. And I think one of the biggest challenge outside of the vaccine stability issues was that all of these pharmacy distributors typically work in a very automated environment, and everything about this process was manual. It required manual intervention at all steps, and so it required a lot of oversight and scrutiny to make sure that the program was running effectively. So throughout these campaigns, I think we've set ourselves up from a systems perspective, I think, quite well to continue on with this work as it does become, I guess, a bit more normalized. So we've got nearly 1,000 pharmacies now who have experience in using the IMSS-BC system. Pharmacies are integrated in the provincial appointment booking system, so it provides a seamless experience, I think, for the public as far as finding a place to get vaccinated. And I think that's been a pain point in other big campaigns like the influenza campaign. I think the other really great thing is we have so much better data now. Like, we understand where people are booking appointments. We understand where capacity is needed to support different areas. We have real-time access to inventory and administration data, so we can manage the pharmacy arm of things, at least with a much greater degree of specificity. So I think that's great. And the other thing now we have as well is we have more information around from years of flu, but also now with kind of pharmacies' experience administering the COVID vaccinations, we kind of have a better understanding of where the provincial capacity for pharmacy can be for these these big population-based campaigns. And so I think, again, that gives us more information on kind of what role pharmacies can play for the future. And so as far as normalizing the COVID vaccinations, I don't know exactly how we do that, but I think some of the areas that we could continue to work on are one is, I think it's effective to manage pharmacies kind of in this parallel track, but also in collaboration with and taking lead from the health authorities. Just given the number of pharmacies and the different ways in which they operate, and the volume of vaccinations that they do, I just think it makes sense to be able to manage it in that way. And then also, I think with the IMSS-BC system, just thinking ahead, like I think Jonathan mentioned, flu and COVID might be a co-administered program. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for the IMSS-BC system to have other vaccines managed within it. Just makes for a more streamlined process for the end users. I won't go over all these points, so I guess I'll leave it open. We'll have some time for questions later, so I'll end off there, Emily.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bryce. We really appreciate all you've done on behalf of the pharmacists of BC, and it really has changed the landscape of our immunization programs. So Dr. Balam, you have been the force behind our provincial campaign, and we thank you for that. Would you share with us what your vision for the campaign in the coming months is, and whether there's potential for integration into our routine programs and partners?
Thanks so much, Emily, and so nice to have the opportunity, and thank you so much to the organizers of this conference for inviting me to come and speak to you. I only despair that I can't see all of you out there, but welcome, and I'm speaking to you from Robson Square, which is on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And we're very fortunate here in Vancouver Coastal to have those nations and our Métis partners, the Métis Association, and one of our charter communities up in Powder River, as partners that we work with every day in our health authority. So thanks again. So Emily, people have asked me how did I get into the position of delivering this program, and really I think I've learned probably more from public health in my career as I'm a general internist and hematologist, and I've worked for 40 years in this province, both in different administrative positions, and I spent nearly 6 years as a deputy minister of health in British Columbia, and I always said that my most fundamental education was really in the area of public health. As many of you know who have gone through training as a physician in this province, and it may be different in others, but we had the Blue Book, which was our public health training. We got offered it up on the last day of our training, and that was kind of it. And it was really both a little bit at my work at BC Women's, but when I got to government, that I really recognized like the critical importance. So the opportunity to lead the vaccine campaign was, a massive privilege. And I had the honor of working with Dr. Henry and, Dr. Monica Naus and all the other incredible leadership around the province of public health. And I think if we can pull up our slides, you've seen Dr. Tan's terrific pictures of, the broad array of different ways that we approached vaccinating our public and vaccinating other people. I would just reflect on the temporary foreign workers program, probably the first time we've ever focused on that population coming into our province, on the seafarers program, which was part of our effort on behalf of Canada as a port province to actually help seafarers, get protected against COVID and actually allow them to, actually come out of their ships in port and visit their families when they got to their home ports, things that we never really thought about until it was brought forward to us. So, I think just in terms of disclosure, the government on this program, I have no conflicts and no relationships with any financial sponsors. And I actually, if you can go on to the next slide. Oh, I've got the thing, sorry. Not sure what I'm supposed to be pointing at. Yeah, I'm pointing that, I'm just not sure. Yeah, okay. So what I thought I would do is quickly just talk to you a little bit of the legacy of what this pandemic immunization program has provided us, and a number of the speakers have already touched on aspects of that. But I think as we look at integration into sort of regular, sorry, I'm just trying to advance this slide. There we go. Okay. There's a massive opportunity for us here. Immunization, as all of you know, is fundamental to population health, protection of our public against preventable disease. And, I would say in Canada, if you look at the national data that we report to the World Health Organization, we've got a way to go. We could do better. And I think we need to leverage what happened in this last remarkable year for all of us, and how, the many, many people within the health sector, within the government, and within many partners who are involved. We've raised the profile of immunization. We've very significantly raised the profile of the importance and criticality of public health. Our public health leaders have become household names in this province, something that, is really unprecedented. And I think that there's things that we should, really try and bring into the ongoing immunization efforts that we have that are increasingly complex. We have more vaccines. We'll have even more with the success of mRNA. We have target groups we want to focus on, all of the things that we had to do in real time and rapid time and in a very evolving, changing structure. So timely and clear, public health policy and prioritization of populations you want to target is critical for actually planning an operation to actually deliver on those goals. And, essentially during this campaign, we used the voice of our provincial health officer. She used the Public Health Act, as did the CMHOs. And we used the whole office of the Public Health Officer to incent vaccination. When we linked it to the vaccine passport for things that were not essential, but were things people would want to do, as well as protecting the workers in those industries, it was an incentive for people to get vaccinated, and it made a big difference. We basically used a lot of the authority under the Public Health Act to allow us to create the capacity that we needed to do the vaccination program in record time. I think one of the most remarkable things about this whole campaign is it was evidence informed. It was data informed. We had data coming from many sources, translated into usable data by the health authorities, by BCCDC, by the government, to really understand where we were, what we were missing, what were the gaps, how would we address them, and actually on a daily basis actually inform our decisions, our operational decisions about how well we were actually doing. I think the IMS-BC, or the Get Vaccinated system, which is how the public knows it, is a remarkable system, and it was built as we were flying. It was an incredible accomplishment that our colleagues in the Ministry of Health under Corey Barkley Shannon Malavec, and many, many others, and in the health authorities who actually help make that system usable and with the input from the public. But it's a remarkable end-to-end system that is the front end of what was always an awkward registry, the Panorama registry, which I know many of our providers and our public health folks found awkward and not terribly friendly. The IMSBC system now provides, a very publicly friendly, usable, adjustable framework and platform for us to really have that registry of truth, which is the Panorama registry, to actually then relate into our ability to invite people in for a vaccine, to have them register, to remind them, to allow more places that they get vaccinated to be booked. Really a remarkable enabler of a successful vaccination campaign. And that should be leveraged into the future. It's an incredible piece of machinery, and it's not going to get us, on its own where we need to, but starting with, significant public health policy decisions made in a timely manner, and, the operational skill sets that we have in public health and in the partners that, in the health authorities, the operational folks, and in many partners out in the community, including our pharmacists and ultimately our physicians, we can continue to take some of that same pointed and purposeful direction to achieve even better results from our mainstream immunization programs. Lots of partners, many, many new relationships that are fundamental, in my experience, to success in delivering complex programs. And, I think there was also a lot of nimbleness in training programs. We adjusted when we realized our programs were too long and too complicated, and not necessarily so in order to meet the volume that we were needing to make. And I think, and Monica and, Danuta and the various experts in BCCDC, can come back to us when we have a little bit more time, as things have settled, to know, did we do harm? Was there any unnecessary harm done because we shortened up training and took a bit of a shortcut approach within a risk framework to actually create capacity with other immunizers and different ways of doing business. My sense is from the feedback we got, that we didn't do any harm, but I think we need to obviously evaluate that. And I think you've talked about communication. It's fundamental, not just communication with your public and with those who are hesitant, but communication with the operational folks, as Bryce described, like having the ability to talk to them on an ongoing basis, make things better for them, easier, and more amenable to the public. If you just go quickly to the next slide. So, we do have some assets that, from I think all of our perspective, we want to leverage. And, the experience of that real-time data, like never before have we had an immunization program where we had that closed loop of data coming right back to us by the end of the day of who we touched, who we vaccinated, where they were, how old they were, what gender they were they in a high-risk group, whatever. And, for me, having spent 40 years in healthcare, I've never had the privilege of, being involved in a program that was so evidence-based on such a real-time data. And I think, the public, the government, they've seen this happen, and they're very aware of the power of that. And it was necessary given the sensitivity and just the incredible scrutiny on this program right across the world and the country. But that is not going to go away. And I think we should remember that. We're not going to be able to kind of retreat back into reporting once a year on immunization. I think when the measles season comes along, or we're looking at childhood immunization, there's going to be a much higher scrutiny and need for information and the ability to talk about it. And, talk about our gaps. I think I've talked about the Get Vaccinated IMSBC system. It continues to evolve and get more flexible. Some very, very significant and expanded people who have now operational skills and are much more knowledgeable about this critical area of our healthcare system. And, not just in our health authorities and our government, but actually in community partners, beyond the pharmacies. We had a number of community partners who are in businesses like the cruise ship and the tourism industry, and they know about managing large groups of people. So when we get back into, either another relapse of the COVID pandemic or a new pandemic, which you guys tell us are going to happen, we've got a much broader platform of experience and skills to work with. And we need to maintain those relationships. The alternate immunizers were a huge issue for us. The learning about surrogate data sets to help us describe. And finally, I've talked about relationships, and I think if there's any message for our partners in the health authorities, keep those relationships alive on a sustained basis, because we're going to need those people, whether it's in the summer, in the fall, but we're going to need to tap them again. So thank you so much, and thanks very much for the invite to be here today. And over to you, Emily.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Ballem, for your leadership in our unprecedented effort. Okay, I'd like to bring you back to Slido now, where we do have a poll open, and it's for you to share any novel ideas with us around vaccine delivery. So ways and places we can integrate COVID-19 vaccine into our routine programs. We'd love for you to share those with us now so that we can take those back as we are considering what it looks like as we move forward. Ooh, single dose vaccines, that's a good one. Okay, so we'll leave the poll open for a few minutes. So again, this is your chance to share. Oh, I like that. BC ferry terminals. These are great. Yeah, definitely GP offices, student health services. Wonderful. Okay, so we will leave some of these up. But what I'm going to do right now is turn things over to Katharine Chilton, who is the vaccine educator at BCCDC, and she will be facilitating the Q&A with our panel.
Great, thanks so much, Emily. So we'll now take some questions from the audience on Slido. And just as a reminder, please direct your questions to the panelist you would like to answer your question. So we actually do have a few questions already. I think this one, I believe, will go to Dr. Balam. The question is there potential for single-dose formulations of COVID vaccinations to be available for community providers in order to reduce wastage?
Thanks so much, Katharine. And I would say it's unlikely that that's going to happen soon, while we still have much of the world to vaccinate and still some uncertainty about, finishing off the booster campaigns and potentially into a dose 4 in the fall. Just the vast numbers of the public that are going to need to be vaccinated. Moving to a single dose vaccine, it would probably be a bit premature. So I don't think that's on the near horizon, but ultimately, of course, it would be something that would be extremely useful. But right now, as you know, the vials are, in some cases, doses of 28 vaccines, 28 doses, and all the way down to 10.
Thank you, Dr. Balam. This next question might also be for you as well. It sounds like everyone wants to be able to provide immunization services, but is this logistically reasonable? And what about vaccine wastage and resources?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, I really appreciated Dr. Tan's presentation and, the fact that she talked about participating in the mass clinics. Our physicians really want to be involved. And, in this province, in the Lower Mainland, half of our children's vaccines are administered in GP's offices and family physician offices. So they're a really critical place, as she well described, where people trust their family physician and they'll be comfortable talking about their worries and concerns. At the end of the day, if you're doing a population-based campaign, and in a time frame, and it always seems to be urgent when each phase of this campaign had a sense of urgency, and you've got to set up a system that's efficient to get to large volumes of people. And in that case, distributing very small amounts of vaccine that have complexities of logistics and cold chain in the early days of that is just not feasible and practical. So I think it depends. If it's an ongoing slow trickle vaccine of children, small children, obviously these things are places where our family physicians' offices will be critical. If we get to a place where we've done the majority of the population and we want to now turn our attention to people who have been hesitant, again, trying to figure out a way that family physicians in their offices can use the multi-dose vials, not waste too much, and actually have enough efficiency to make it worthwhile for them, that can happen. So whether the vaccine is fridge stable makes a big difference. How many doses in a vial, affects wastage. All these things have to be taken into consideration. But, I think you have to assess what's the job at hand, what's your timeline, and then, build your operating plan based on that.
Great, thanks, Dr. Ballem. This question is for Jonathan Spence. It was mentioned by you that a large part of integrating the COVID vaccines is into the existing immunization program. Will the number of public health nurse positions, or FTE, per site be increased to reflect, oops, it flipped over, the increase in the public health nurses' workloads?
I can say that I can't give you a nice, clean answer to that, as that has to do with funding and all those other pieces. That being said, this is additional work that didn't exist before COVID was a virus that impacted humans. And so as a result, going forward, there will be an increase in the volume of work. Obviously, each year, as we get those 5-year-old cohorts, that's going to be at this point, a set number or a set amount of work that will go forward. And then also, as we move forward, either for a regular booster program or specific booster program, we would need to take a look at what is the work that is net new, because COVID now exists and we now have an immunization program for that, for COVID. And then the hope would be that that sort of thing would be funded in terms of, if we don't fund this work, the other alternative is we identify other work that doesn't get done. So to me, it's not, and obviously there are abilities to make it more efficient, increase our output, especially when we have periods of higher demand, so a booster program in a finite amount of time. But ultimately, this is work that didn't exist before. And so it's either find resources to do this work or identify other work that was being done that doesn't provide the equivalent value and shift that capacity over to this work. But in terms of definitive, will there be more people specifically for this work in public health? I don't feel that I can speak to that.
The next question, I'm going to read it out. I think this might be for Dr. Ballem as well. I notice a change in the public gradually and slowly shifting from gratitude to almost resentment towards public health at this stage. Is there any concern about this being discussed at provincial levels, and are there any plans to address it?
Well, I think we see that happening, and it's not so much about public health, but public health is the face of the pandemic. And it is a pretty natural thing. People they're done, as you know, we're all done with COVID, and they're all done too. And, I think the most critical thing, and yes, there's a lot of awareness at government, but at the end of the day, what we want to make sure is that, our job is to be on the high ground and, keep our eye on the ball and the readiness we'll need if COVID, if we get another variant or there's a need for another dose in a hurry further down the coming months. And I know NACI is talking about these things. But, I think that we know it's been a very stressful time. We've seen it in our families. We've seen it in our social networks with our colleagues at work, and everybody's experienced this differently. And I think, our provincial health officer has demonstrated just that ability to be saying, let's be patient, let's be kind, let's all be safe. And that has to continue to be our mantra. What has happened in some parts of our country, but mostly in other jurisdictions, in terms of losing key public health leaders because of the political reactions to them, is really unfortunate, and something that I think in Canada to date we've done very well to protect our public health leaders. And it's really, I hope we continue to do that. And I think our public have learned a lot about public health. And so I don't see this as, something that isn't going to improve with a little bit of sunshine, with the summer, with some time off from having to worry about COVID. But I think we need to be ready for other things that may come along in the future, and know that it's not going to be, we won't get that same alignment necessarily of the public with what might need to be done. So we're going to have to be extra patient and thoughtful, as you've talked about in your communications.
Thanks, Dr. Ballem. Those are all great points. This next question could be for Bryce. Do BC pharmacists have appropriate Indigenous cultural safety and humility training? Are pharmacists equipped to have conversations with Indigenous clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that is an area in which pharmacists can use some additional education and training, and we've been in ongoing discussions with First Nations Health Authority around how do we increase the awareness and knowledge of pharmacists in this area. Yeah, I think it's a work in progress. I think there's a lot more room to grow there for pharmacists, for sure.
Great, thanks, Bryce. Sorry, just got a new question flipped up here. I'm just going to read the question, and then we can decide. Oh, they're kind of changing around. This one's for Dr. Tan. Can family physicians report other routine vaccinations they provide in the same system they use to report COVID vaccinations? This would make the work for public health much less easier, as the reporting gap would be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. Yeah. So currently we have a reporting system where we send immunizations directly to public health. And this is unfortunately done sort of pen and paper and not electronic. I think we would welcome an electronic form of record keeping. As a family physician, I've definitely worked with the IMS program at the vaccination clinic. And if we had access to that at the office, I think it's something that we could certainly incorporate. But I think that's the short edge. So we don't actually have the system in place for us to directly input our community vaccinations. But I think that we are already reporting, we are already doing the work, but it's just a paper trail at this point.
And maybe I can jump in and add to that, Dr. Tan. I think we spent from the end of July through to, I guess, Bryce, it would be about the end of January, actually training and bringing on board 1,000 pharmacies, and probably 3 individuals on average, so maybe about 3,000 pharmacists and pharmacy assistants trained on IMS-BC. It's a great system, but when you're dealing end-to-end with inventory and administration, the clinic component, the inventory component, the patient booking and registration component, it's a complex system, and you do need to be trained. So that's one of the reasons why, given the need to have real-time data on a 24-hour basis from this program, we really didn't have the resources or the time to train all the family physicians who wanted to do it. But it's very possible, and we're actually looking from a system perspective at what it would take to try and shorten that up and make it easier. Because when we went to the pharmacies, they all had their own systems, and we said, no, we want everyone on the same system so we can have access to that data and use all the attributes of it. And, it was a bit of a grunt for them, but they were incredibly good sports about it, and it's worked very, very well. And I think the same could go for physicians, for sure. So that's in our plan. We're just sorting out at a system level in terms of interoperability and how that might work to try and get it. I just want to put in a word around APHEs. I think I got lots of feedback on the APHE reports. I would say that we probably could do better on our APHE reports. I had a number of patients who came back to me and said, I had this experience, I went to Emerge, it was clearly related to a vaccination and similar to things we've seen in the literature, but they were told, no. And, what I know is that physicians hate those AFI forms. And, maybe we need to look at them and, perhaps they could be a bit more streamlined, but I think the responsibility and accountability of all our providers, filling out the documentation, getting it into the system, filling out the AFIs when that's appropriate, it's just a critical part of a high quality immunization program. So I just want to put in a plug for you guys and your AFI registry, Monica.
Great, thanks Dr. Tan, and thank you Dr. Ballem. The next question I think might also go to you, Dr. Ballem. It says nurses get paid less per hour than compared to physicians to immunize for COVID. Going forward, when there is less demand, are there going to be prioritized to be immunization providers? Seems like a lot of savings for the healthcare system.
I actually heard a lot about this. I got a lot of emails over the last year from all my nursing friends who found themselves sitting doing exactly the same thing next to their physician colleagues and wondered why this. So I can't explain the history of compensation, but I think the really good point is, public health has so many things that in my experience it wants to do, feels it should be doing, and doesn't necessarily have time. And, I think beyond just the sort of public health nurse and physician discussion, like we've now got a broad array of people who learned how to put on a very high quality vaccination experience, who went into many different places that had never been breached before with vaccines. And I think as we look forward into whether it's COVID immunization or anything else, like how can we make our vaccination program as effective and efficient as possible, tap into the resources, all the assets that are out there that now we've shown, go beyond just the public health resources, and make sure that we're delivering these programs that are so vital as quickly as we can to the target audiences so that the outcomes are, really optimized, and that we have the data real time, and that we actually potentially free up opportunities for public health nurses to do, many of the other things that they feel is critical. So, and from a value for money perspective, that all has to be taken into consideration as well. So doctors, if we get into small babies, obviously some doctors' offices are going to be vital to that. But should they be the only vehicle for broad immunization, non-complex? Probably not. Their real strength is in people who are hesitant, who need to spend that time learning about it. The willing and everything will line up and get it done in a clinic. Likely that's a more efficient way to do it. So we have to take all these things into consideration.
And I'll actually just jump in a little because I feel like I have something as well. I think that looking forward, and not just for COVID immunization, but immunization in general, that we really need to be focused on not only who can immunize, but who's the right immunizer for the right client. That there are going to be some clients that you need a highly trained public health nurse immunizing. There are going to be some clients who are very comfortable and want to integrate it into the regular life and want to go to the pharmacy. There are some clients who want to go and see their family physician and have the other pieces of their health taken care of, and that also is an immunization opportunity. So when we're talking about mass clinics, and especially on the scale that we've done, it partially is a product of we needed all hands on deck. And so we had a great collaboration of different kinds of immunizers in those settings. But as we go forward, both for COVID as well as general immunization, it's getting the right immunizer mix for our client base and making sure that all our clients, independent of where they are geographically, where they are socially, health-wise, they all have an opportunity to access COVID immunization, but also any other immunization that's beneficial to them. And that's going to, I think, going forward, not just be only these folks immunized, only public health immunizes, or only physicians immunized, but it is that mix that we've had in the past with flu programs, with our traditional regular immunization programs. And I think it's really, like I was saying before, integrating that COVID immunization going forward into those regular programs that we already have and have had in this province, working successfully for quite a while.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Balam, and thank you, as well. Looks like we have time for just one more question. I'm just going to read the question, and it might be a combination of maybe Dr. Ballem and Jonathan. The pandemic has highlighted the barriers that exist for communication between primary care, public health, and many of our health authorities using different public health systems. How will the Ministry of Health and regional health authorities work together so that we have one public health electronic registry?
I assume you're talking about a registry for immunization, but I think that the IMSBC, Panorama it's a legacy system. I was the deputy when we first started the project in 2004 or so of getting Panorama ready across the country. But it works. It's been incredibly robust during this campaign, but as I said earlier, the front end wasn't a good one. So I think we've got an opportunity now, and that would be the intent of the government, I think, to get all our immunizations in through IMSBC into Panorama, to then reverse engines and send out reminders and focus on populations that we want to be sure get in and get invited. And then to John's point, where's the right place to send them to ensure they get their vaccination in an expedited way and have the proper and appropriate experience that they need, as depending on whatever group they fit into. So all hands on deck, like I say, for all immunizations, and let's get her done. So thanks so much.
And I think the only thing I would say in that, sorry, I'll be very quick, is there's sort of two pieces. It's where the data lives, which is the registry, and that is the Panorama. And then it's how we access the data, both in and out. And so IMSBC has been very helpful in terms of getting that information out. But we still absolutely have gaps for physician offices to actually see what the immunization record is. And in some places, Care Connect is solving that, for pharmacies as well. And so I think it is certainly, how do we have a system, not just sort of a broad system, not a specific computer system, but rather how do we connect the data and how do we make sure we can get it in and get it out when it's needed appropriately. So it is still work in progress and something to look forward to into the future.
Much, Jonathan, and thank you very much, Dr. Ballem. I believe we're out of time for this session. I would thank you so much to all the panelists and to the audience as well for all your many very insightful questions. I think we'll send you over to Slido again for one more poll. Thanks again.